Back in what we would later learn were just the early days of the COVID pandemic, I made a video about movie musicals. And there was one film in particular which, gave me pause.
Bless your beautiful hide, wherever you may be.
Seven Brides for Seven Brothers tells the story of lifelong mountain man Adam Pontypi, who rides into town one day to find himself a bride. After sizing up the local prospects, he quickly woos Millie, the town barmaid, which is only so easy, in part because she's sick of being the town barmaid, and would rather cook and clean for just one person instead of a whole town.
How about what?
I just told you. How about marrying me?
I'd have to finish my chores.
For what it's worth, there does seem to be some genuine chemistry between the two, and on their way back home to Adam's homestead, Millie has a whole song about how excited she is.
I think how wonderful it would be to cook and care for one man. Just one man. Now that it's happened, I can't hardly believe it's true.
Ding dong, ding-a-ling dong, were the steeple bells ever quite as gay?
But when they finally arrive, Adam reveals that Millie's meant to cook and clean for him and his 6 younger brothers.
Just remember your ABCs. Adam, Benjamin, Caleb, Daniel, Ethan, Frank, and Gideon.
At first, Millie resists, or at least kicks them out of the dining room.
You're gonna act like hogs. You're gonna eat like hogs.
But soon enough, she settles into her new role and acts as a sort of older sister / den mother to the boys, even going so far as to give them advice on how to snag wives of their own.
Go and courtin', oh, it sets your senses in a whirl. Go and courtin', dudin' up to go and see a girl.
They soon catch the eyes of some local women in town with their fancy dancing.
Looks like them Pontypi brothers.
But the jealous men in town quickly pick a fight and drive them all back into the mountains. With winter closing in and no wifely prospects,
Can't make no vows to a herd of cows.
Adam himself suggests that they all simply ride back into town and steal some.
So what'd the Romans do? They went down there and they carried them off.
His explicit inspiration is the kidnapped war brides of Sabine.
Oh, yes, them women was sobbing, fit to be tied. Every muscle was throbbing from that riotous ride.
So they raid the town and ride back home with 6 kidnapped women in tow, and then trigger an avalanche on their way back so they can't be pursued. Millie is understandably furious when she finds out and banishes the men to the stables while she safeguards the women in the house to wait out the winter.
This house is for the girls. You're not gonna set foot in it as long as they're here.
But over the course of the long holiday season, the women start to warm up to the idea of marrying their captors.
Oh, they say when you marry in June, you're a bride all your life.
By the time the mountain pass finally thaws out and the townsfolk ride in to rescue them, the Pontypi boys realize they've screwed up and attempt to re-kidnap the women in order to send them home. But the women have decided all's forgiven and take advantage of Millie's newborn baby to arrange spontaneous shotgun weddings for themselves.
A while back I heard a wee babe crying in the house. Whose is it?
Mine!
So I saw this film and I was shocked, horrified, aghast. Not just that the film exists, but that it's oft considered one of the most beloved romantic movie musicals of all time.
It is literally my mom's favorite movie. Kidnapping? Marriage under false pretenses?
Besides, if I'd have told you beforehand, you might not have married me.
Genetically predetermined social roles?
I mean, the boys are kind of hard and close, so there'll be a lot of washing and mending, but now the...
But I'm here.
The presumption that women's labor isn't meant to be compensated?
This is horrifying.
I know everyone's all happy and consenting by the end of the film,
We do?
but that only feels like just enough lampshading to give the audience plausible deniability.
We do.
This is a bad, creepy movie enjoyed by bad, creepy people. Not like the romances I like. Movies like Waitress, Ball of Fire, When Harry Met Sally, Harold and Maude, The Age of Adeline, Overboard, Before Sunset, It Happened One... Wait, Overboard?
Overboard tells the story of Dean Proffitt, a freelance handyman who's hired by multi-millionaire socialite Joanna Staten to remodel one of the closets in her yacht. She doesn't specify what kind of wood she wants him to use, and when he picks oak instead of cedar, she refuses to pay.
And you will eat it because I wanted cedar.
You may have wanted cedar, but you didn't ask for cedar.
Well, the entire civilized world knows that all closets are made of cedar.
And in the ensuing argument, she knocks him overboard. And his tools.
Not my tool belt! You owe me $600!
Keep going!
But then later that night, while she's looking for her wedding ring up on deck, Joanna herself slips overboard and gets picked up by a local fishing boat the next day with a severe case of amnesia.
Do you know your name?
Of course I know my name. Oh, this is absurd.
Her real husband stops by soon enough, but he quickly decides he's better off without her.
No, I never saw her before in my life.
Then Dean hears about Joanna on the news.
That's her. Who? The bitch!
And decides he's gonna go down to the hospital and try to convince her that she's his wife.
Annie!
The plan is to put her to work in his own home, just until she's paid back the money she owes him for remodeling the closet. Maybe mess with her mind a little bit too.
My mother's a lush.
Was, honey. Cirrhosis.
What about my father?
Oh, he's alive and well. And due for parole in what, 2 years?
Oh, God!
Did I mention Dean is a recent widower with 4 kids? Yeah, his kids are their own handful and a half.
Hi, Bob. My name's Joe.
A falsetto child?
One thing the film makes very clear from early on is that Dean is not in it for sex.
I'm not gonna tell you she doesn't have a great body. She does, you know. She's pretty decent face. Nah, she's too rich for my blood.
Dean fakes being drunk their first night together, and then a chronic back injury as an excuse for them to sleep in separate beds.
The couch.
What?
I know that doesn't make him like an icon of feminism or anything, but for now it's important to note just in terms of figuring out what Dean actually wants.
After a torturous few weeks of keeping house, Joanna begins to settle into her new role, and eventually, the whole house starts to settle in with her. Within a few weeks, she's streamlining the family schedule, defending the kids at school, and even helps Dean achieve his lifelong dream of opening up a miniature golf course.
I really don't have anything to say except that, well, there wouldn't be a Wonders of the World miniature golf course if it wasn't for the imagination and the creativity of one woman. That's my Annie.
And it's about this same time, they start falling in love. As Dean's feelings for Joanna grow, so does his guilt.
I've done something that I'm ashamed of.
But when he finally tries to come clean,
JS is you. These are yours and we're not married. There, God, I finally said it.
his kids keep selling the lie against his wishes because they've grown attached to her.
Go ahead, tell her.
Dad, tell her what?
Tell her she's not your mother.
But she is our mother.
Finally, Joanna's real husband realizes he's gonna lose out on Joanna's fortune if he doesn't go get her, and so he finally comes calling, and the jig is up.
Yes, you're Grant Staten III. I'm Joanna Staten. Oh, God, this is the happiest day of my life. Oh, thank you. Thank you for bringing me here and making me a wife and a mother. And why did you do that? You're that sweaty carpenter who hates me.
Yeah, it's bad.
And these are your children, and you made me believe that.
You stay mad, don't leave!
But once Joanna returns to her former life as a conceited socialite,
Andrew, I'm sitting.
she quickly realizes she'd rather be back with her newfound family instead of with these rich assholes. And so when Dean and the boys call in a favor to the Coast Guard to try and intercept her yacht so that Dean can pledge his love to her, she and Dean both jump overboard.
Tell my mother I'll call her! Ah!
And live happily ever after.
What could I possibly give you ever that you don't already have?
A little girl.
So, Kidnapping, marriage under false pretenses, genetically predetermined social roles, the presumption that women's labor isn't meant to be compensated.
And I mean, in this movie, Joanna and Dean actually have sex. There are even graver accusations you could make against Dean Proffitt than you could against Adam Ponape.
So, why is my brain so concerned about Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and yet has nary a second thought for Overboard? No, I was asking, why?
Oh, yes, them women was sobbing, 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 fit to be tied. Every muscle was throbbing, throbbing from that riotous ride. Seems they cried and kissed and cried all over that Roman countryside. So don't forget that when you're taking a bride.
Look, I don't like it any more than you do, but it seems I am nigh incapable of making a video about anything but my own tastes anymore. Still with me? Good. That's your prerogative. So in order to find out why my brain has these two different reactions to these two films, I figure at some point I should probably stop asking how they're similar and start asking how they're different.
Part 1. Battle of the Sexes versus Class Warfare.
So the first big difference that jumps out at me is that Seven Brides for Seven Brothers frames its central conflict as a battle between the sexes, whereas Overboard frames it as a battle between classes.
Adam and his 6 brothers are uncivilized brutes. That's the source of all their problems and of their boneheaded solution. They can't convince any women to marry them, so they just up and steal some. You might be tempted to argue that this is a struggle between urban versus rural, with the countrified mountain men lacking the basic social skills necessary to interact with city gals like fellow human beings. But the men in town seem to be just as territorial and single-minded in their pursuit of wives as the Ponape boys.
Looks like them Ponape brothers.
They're simply willing to do more courting first in order to get them. And it's not just that the mountain men are presented as slovenly brutes. That alone doesn't suggest a gendered essentialism. It's that a wife, and only a wife, is the sole proffered solution.
This is the washroom. I mean, the boys are kind of hard on clothes, so there'll be a lot of washing and mending, but now the...
But I'm here.
All their violent, sloppy habits are characterized as an innate quality of all men that must be hammered out by the domesticating influence of a woman. That is, in fact, the whole damn premise.
There's the dinner bell, so ring it loud when you get supper ready.
Now compare that to Overboard, where Dean and his boys are also presented as slovenly brutes, but Dean doesn't target Joanna simply because she's a woman. He targets her because she's a snooty socialite who had already exploited his labor for her own selfish amusement.
Job was not done to my satisfaction.
Dean freely admits she's no good at the kind of work he's forcing her to do.
How's it going with your debutante?
Oh, she's one lousy cook, I'll tell you that. Not as long as I don't have to do it.
But then this isn't about getting Joanna to fulfill some genetically mandated social role. It's good old-fashioned revenge. Granted, much of the work that Dean tells Joanna to do is historically very gendered, with cooking, cleaning, and raising the kids being the ultimate heteronormative trifecta. But then this also looks like Dean telling Joanna to do the things he simply can't do while he's at work. In fact, the first time Dean tells Joanna to cook dinner and clean house on a day that he didn't go to work, that's the day of her first big mutiny.
None of this ever
Bothered me before. Well, it bothers me now.
Just to be clear, I'm not giving Dean the benefit of the doubt here.
I have no clue whether Dean thinks women should or shouldn't be responsible for keeping house and raising kids.
What's for dinner?
I'm giving it to screenwriter Leslie Dixon.
The gender versus class division pops up at the end of each film, too. What resolves the conflict in either film?
In Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, it's when the women decide they're okay with marrying their captors. That's it.
We do.
It's not when the boys learn to appreciate women as independent human beings. That might have led to the women's release, but it wouldn't have resolved the conflict, which is that the Ponape boys are in want of some wives.
A man can't sleep when he sleeps with sheep.
That only gets resolved when the ladies finally agree that they too would like to be married and simply make it so. There are a couple of fleeting shots of everyone sort of pairing off and being polite to each other in the last stages of winter, which you could try and argue is the ultimate reason the women decide to marry them, that they've actually bonded, even if just off camera. But, I don't know. They were already singing about marriage long before the Pontaby boys ever learned to be nice to them.
The groom's waiting at the altar, here comes the bride. They're each promising to love and obey.
The unspoken message of the film seems to be that men and women have this natural antagonism towards each other, which can only be remedied through marriage. Two things I know not to be true.
Whereas in Overboard, the conflict isn't resolved when Joanna decides to marry Dean. It's when she learns the value of the working class.
Shake. Lick. Drink.
Her ordeal has taught her the worth of the people she employs. Not just the worth of their labor, but their worth as human beings. She treats them like people now.
I've behaved so badly. I don't know how you put up with me for so long.
Honestly, her and Dean jumping overboard to be with each other at the end of the film is more of an ending than I ever needed. I actually think it's a bit overcooked, with so many conflicts getting resolved back to back to back that it starts to feel tacky. Joanna jumps ship, her husband falls overboard, Cornelius resigns, the reunion with Dean, Joanna gets to keep her money.
Well, the truth is that it's mine. The boat, the money, everything. It's all mine. Dean! Dean, it's okay!
The boys are making out their Christmas lists.
How do you spell Porsche?
Far be it from me to suggest that this is the most subversive ending in the world.
A little girl.
Yeah. It's about as subversive as a Michael Bublé cover.
Santa Buddy, a 65 convertible to steel blue.
But it's not like the message of the film is that women would all be happier if they just settled down with a man who was nice to them once.
Which leads me to my second point.
Part 2. Personal enemies versus personal compatibility.
The central question of any romance is, what keeps the lovers apart? And over the course of film history, there have been different answers supplied for this question.
Back in the golden age of Hollywood, there was usually a central narrative antagonism between the two leads.
Simply put, there were enemies.
In Ball of Fire, Barbara Stanwyck doesn't love Gary Cooper. She only pretends to like his work, and then him personally, so that she can hide from the cops. In Adam's Rib, Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy play two married lawyers who take on opposing clients in a high-stakes murder trial. And in The Lady Eve, Barbara Stanwyck fleeces Henry Fonda using two different false identities. First as a card sharp in order to steal his money, and then as a British heiress in order to humiliate him. What do all these films have in common?
The two lovers have competing interests. They are actively opposed to each other's goals.
I'd call it the enemies to lovers trope, except they sometimes literally start out as lovers who then develop competing interests, like in Adam's Rib. Or they don't start out as lovers, but they don't stop being enemies as soon as they fall in love, like in The Lady Eve. Call it the enemies and lovers trope.
Now, I've cited 3 classics here. But there are risks associated with this trope too. You run the risk of shortchanging the good old-fashioned chemistry of the two leads.
I think Christmas in Connecticut suffers precisely because there's absolutely no reason given as to why Barbara Stanwyck falls in love with Dennis Morgan. It is literally love at first sight.
And I'm not opposed to that as a rule.
But when Stanwyck's deception is uncovered at the end of the film, Dennis Morgan is just like, we're in love, and the conflict resolves itself like that.
You've stopped talking. That's good.
Which sorta negates the point of giving them competing interests in the first place.
So on the one hand, we've got the lovers' competing interests keeping them apart, which was a time-honored tradition of the golden age of Hollywood. But as we move into the modern era, there's usually far less narrative antagonism between the two leads. They can still be antagonistic, but they're usually working towards the same goal. So what keeps the lovers apart? Well, it's usually a question of personal compatibility.
In The Proposal, Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock both want to fool everyone into thinking they're in love. That's the common goal. But they don't like each other, just on a personal level, and that's what keeps them apart.
Is that your family?
Yes.
They tell you to quit?
Every single day. Ms. Tate's office.
The movie ends not when they finally get married, which literally doesn't even happen by the time the credits roll, but when they finally decide they're romantically compatible.
Marry me. Because I'd like to date you.
And again, nothing wrong with using this trope, but you can definitely screw it up if you're not careful. The worst offender in my recent memory is a movie like Trainwreck, where the personal compatibility of the two leads is favored at the expense of what I can only describe as no narrative conflict whatsoever.
Amy Schumer doesn't want to be tied down, and Bill Hader doesn't want to commit, and then the film ends when they suddenly decide that they will.
I think we really like each other and we should start dating.
Granted, I'm being extremely general here. Not every romance fits neatly into one category or the other, nor is either style relegated to its own era.
It Happened One Night is totally a personal compatibility romance, despite being made in the 1930s. And The Age of Adeline is a more modern example of the cross-purposes trope, where the two leads are completely smitten with each other right from the get-go, but they're opposed to each other's personal goals, with Adeline Bowman wanting to keep her immortality a secret, and Harrison Ford wanting to know the truth at all costs.
Please. The truth.
Great, now I'm crying.
But just generally speaking, I'd say there's been a steady decline in the personal enemies trope within the romantic comedy subgenre over the last 100 years, with a greater preponderance of the personal compatibility trope rising to take its place. God, that isn't punchy at all. This is the internet. Let's call it the eHarmony effect. Alright, enough deep background. Regardless of anyone's personal preference, I think we can all agree that Seven Brides for Seven Brothers is a textbook example of the personal enemies trope.
The Ponape boys and their kidnapped brides are directly opposed to each other's interests, with virtually no thought whatsoever given over to how personally compatible they are.
Like, it's not even an afterthought.
They might as well have paired off based on favorite colors.
And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but you do have to accept their pair bonding as a given if you're going to enjoy the film. Which, again, I promise I don't mind.
Millie and Adam's personal compatibility is really the main focus of the story anyway, with the Ponape boys and their quest for wives serving as kind of a foil to Adam and Millie's struggles. But yeah, the story doesn't work if you can't accept at face value the fact that these 6 brides decided in the space of one winter that they're totally cool with marrying their captors.
We do.
And as for Overboard, you could argue that it's an example of the classic enemies to lovers trope.
In fact, I think it's the enemies to lovers trope, falling in love with your own con. But the movie also spends an awful lot of time exploring the personal compatibility of its two leads.
You can be quite charming when you want to be.
You just caught me on a bad day.
Joanna and Dean aren't even antagonists by the midpoint of the film, and even after Joanna regains her memory and leaves Dean at the end of the second act, the only thing that brings them together again is how they feel about each other. Ergo, it's a hybrid, a combination of the personal enemies and personal compatibility tropes. It's giving me the best of both worlds. I don't have to accept their love at face value, but there's also an actual conflict here. I don't begrudge Seven Brides for Seven Brothers for shortchanging the eHarmony analysis of its love interests.
We do.
But Overboard doesn't make me choose.
It's a hell of a day at sea, sir!
Part 3. Love as a solution versus love as a complication.
Alright, I've been saving the best for last.
The single biggest difference between the two films, as I see it, which is, of course, the most wildly subjective of them all.
In Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, falling in love solves the central conflict.
Boys can't get wives, boys kidnap women, women fall in love with boys, and
We do.
boys get wives. Case closed, end of film. Whereas in Overboard, falling in love only makes things 1,000 times more complicated. Joanna swindles Dean. Dean swindles Joanna.
Annie!
And shit.
Why should this distinction matter? Well, I can't tell you why it should matter to anyone. Not to any filmmaker, and certainly not you. I only know why it matters to me. When I was growing up, I never saw love and marriage as an inevitability. I've always felt pretty comfortable on my lonesome, pretty good at self-motivation and internal validation. And I'm not bragging. It's not like I haven't struggled from time to time, nor do I think that everybody needs to be an expert in these things. They just happen to be part of my starting character build. If it makes you feel any better, I am absolutely terrible in groups of 4 or more. But solitude doesn't scare me the way it seems to scare so many others. Not in the same way, anyway. I've never felt incomplete single. And as soon as I was old enough to date, it never felt like something that I had to do. It wasn't suddenly gotta find a partner. It was more like maybe someday I'll find someone I'd like to partner with. And given all of that, I don't know if this will come as a surprise or not at this point, but I did. I did find someone I wanted to partner with. I fell in love with someone that I had originally been friends with for over 2 years. And let me tell you, falling in love didn't solve shit.
Everything got harder. Everything got more complicated. There I was, minding my own business, knowing exactly what I wanted out of life and what I was willing to do in order to get it, when suddenly, wham, everything out the window. Where do I live? What do I eat? What should I spend my money on? How many movies am I going to watch tonight? Which chores need to get done? Whomst do I smooch?
I'm not saying I don't have any say over these things, and there are plenty of things that are still exclusively my purview. My body, my beliefs, and my collection of prehistoric archosaurs are just 3 things that are exclusively my domain. But in the broader sense, I am now fundamentally accountable to more than just myself. I've tried articulating my thoughts about love in previous videos, and I've never been able to do it to my own satisfaction. I feel like it always comes out so cynical and whiny.
I say things like, everything got harder after I fell in love, and the response might as well be, well, if love is so hard, why don't you go back to being single? I mean, didn't you just say you were totally cool with it before Hot Shot?
And, okay, but that's exactly my point. I was fine with being single until I met my partner, and now I can't go back. I can't go back to the way I was before because I need to know what the love of my life thinks about biodegradable garbage bags, Dante's Inferno, neoliberalism, the ongoing worldwide vanilla shortage, Central American indigenous self-determination, Meg Ryan's filmography. I just can't imagine a world where I'm cut off from my partner's perspective. It doesn't even matter what the subject is. The fact that it's their perspective is what makes it so important to me.
And so, given all of that, the idea that falling in love would actually solve more problems than it creates is sort of a non-starter for me. Or at least, I gotta suspend my disbelief way harder. Yeah, and I think that's a big part of why I prefer Overboard to 7 Brides for 7 Brothers.
For I can't help falling in love.
Part 4. Do films even have a moral responsibility to reflect our own ethics?
No. Next question. Well, wait, hold on. Maybe we don't ever want to see some moralizing after-school special, but we don't want films that contradict our values, right? Well, I am a firm believer in the idea that it's not any film's job to teach us a moral lesson, to editorialize the behavior of its characters.
There was a tweet going around a few months back where this guy sarcastically said that he likes adding little editorial asides and brackets to all the stories that he writes, so that the audience knows he doesn't condone any of his characters' bad behavior.
And the state of modern media analysis being what it is, not only did a lot of people assume that he was serious, some people thought it was a good idea.
But Serge, didn't you start your YouTube career by calling out sexist media tropes?
Okay, first of all, don't ever refer to what I do on YouTube as a career.
I gotta break into Hollywood before they start pushing 3 ads before each video is all I'm saying.
But more importantly, I think there's a big difference between calling out tropes and calling out individual films. Anybody can tell a story about anything. I'm a big believer in that.
You want to make a movie about unrepentant axe murderers, vindictive con men, and people who buy NFTs?
They're buddies.
Be my guest.
But tropes are a collective attempt to normalize something. A trope is only a trope because it's become storytelling shorthand. It's been taken for granted. When I examine a movie trope, I'm not necessarily questioning the individual films that use it. I'm questioning why it isn't being questioned. This has been on my mind a lot lately because I feel like recently there's been more and more discourse that's been trying to equate people's opinion of a film with their moral value, like as a person.
I saw it most recently with Don't Look Up, Adam McKay's movie about a planet-killing comet and a world completely indifferent to the threat that it poses.
Which I really liked. Probably won't watch it again for a while, but it would have made my top 10 if I were making a top 10 list this year.
But then you had people on one side implying that you were a straight-up climate denier if you didn't love it, and people on the other side who said you were an ignorant fatalist for enjoying a film that stood no chance of changing anyone's mind about climate change. I showed this movie to my family and they're all still driving SUVs, 1 out of 10. Whereas if you ask me, both opinions are just complete belfry bat nonsense.
I'm going to save all my thoughts about this subject for another video, but the basic gist I want to cover here is that movies are not here to save us, but that also means movies aren't here to destroy us.
I'm not saying they can't carry political messages or that they shouldn't be interpreted critically.
I hear you. I hear you.
In fact, I think it is critical to interpret films through feminist frameworks, leftist lenses, anti-capitalist contexts, and what have you. But you're not trying to decide if a film is feminist, leftist, or anti-capitalist at that point, or at least, I'm not. Barring any heavy-handed editorializations by the filmmakers themselves, all you can do is simply interpret films through these various theoretical frameworks. There are, for example, pro-leftist readings of The Dark Knight Rises.
You're all gonna wonder how you ever thought you could live so large and leave so little for the rest of us.
And anti-leftist readings.
There's a storm coming, remember? This is what you wanted.
And neither of them are necessarily incorrect.
But regardless of whatever line of inquiry you eventually wind up taking, my point is that the stakes are never as high as an actual election. Disliking Marvel isn't praxis.
The purpose of a film like Don't Look Up isn't to make climate change deniers feel bad about their beliefs, or to give climate change catastrophists an excuse to give up. I don't even know if that's possible.
But I think lots of people, and myself included, have been feeling more and more pressure to put more and more of a moral emphasis on our media takes lately, in part because capitalism has obliterated so much of our community and commodified so much of our culture that one of the few things we've got left to pin our identities to is one of the few communal joys left.
The collective cathartic joy of cinema.
And we go somewhere we've never been before. Somehow, heartbreak feels good in a place like this. Our heroes feel like the best part of us.
I see we're off topic again.
I like Don't Look Up because it validated my feelings of helplessness in the face of an ongoing crisis of government malfeasance. It didn't tell me to give up, and it didn't provide me any ammunition for any future debates with climate deniers. But then I wasn't looking for any of that. I just wanted someone to remind me that I'm not crazy for feeling crazy.
What have we done to ourselves? How do we fix it?
Part 5. The one and only inevitable conclusion.
It's fine if you like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I mean, that's the only possible conclusion at this point, right?
Even if I didn't already know my mom's opinion.
Liking Seven Brides for Seven Brothers doesn't mean you endorse marital kidnapping any more than liking Overboard does.
There are definitely key differences in how each film presents its central conflict, which means that different viewers' mileage will inevitably vary. Maybe you hate both. That's a valid opinion.
But if making this video has taught me anything, it's that I can't draw conclusions about anybody's moral worth based on their opinion of a couple of movies. Which sounds so obvious when you say it out loud, but people do that. I've done it.
People like movies for different reasons, and watch them for different things.
Must you watch that thing incessantly?
Yes, I must. It has a tawdry escapist quality that soothes my nerves.
I just revealed some incredibly personal thoughts and feelings about some of the most complicated emotions I've ever experienced, just to try and articulate what I think I'm getting from a 1987 romantic comedy with this score.
Can't hit them all out of the park, Alan. And frankly, I don't think it's especially realistic, or even very helpful, to demand the same level of thought and introspection from anyone who says that they like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Now, if you go ahead and tell me you like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers precisely because you think that women's labor isn't meant to be compensated, or that women's social roles are biologically determined, or that men are intrinsically sloppy brutes who need the domesticating influence of a woman in order to learn how to be decent human beings, I'll go ahead and judge you then.
In fact, I think a lot of viewers' discomfort comes from the notion that the people with these regressive beliefs might feel validated by the film, and I'm very sympathetic to that concern.
But you wouldn't be judging them for liking a film at that point. You'd be judging them, and rightfully so, for their shitty beliefs.
At this point, I can even say I understand the appeal. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers captures that feeling of being very young and having no clue how to flirt. One sympathizes.
I still don't know how to flirt. Thank God somebody locked me down years ago.
People come along and give you all sorts of advice, and it's almost always wrong. And then when you're a little older and wiser, you are inevitably mortified by your past behavior.
Don't get me wrong, I'm completely sympathetic to the idea that it was wrong for the men to learn what they did in this fashion.
It was wrong for them to finally realize that women should be treated as equals only by doing these terrible things first.
But I guess my question is, do you think the movie disagrees?
The kidnappings are explicitly coded as wrong, and the boys do seem genuinely penitent at the end of the film, or at least they're trying to put things back the way they were before. The fact that the Ponape boys still come out with wives in the end isn't strictly an endorsement of abuse. It could simply be an instance of dramatic irony. They seem more surprised than anyone that the women actually change their minds.
We do.
The alternative would be to see them punished. But then I thought we decided we didn't want films to editorialize the behavior of its characters.
Ultimately, in the end, I definitely think it's more than a little weird that the women all chose to do what they did. But the film does go well out of its way to confirm that the women did indeed get to decide for themselves what it is they ultimately wanted to do. And is that such a terrible film to enjoy?
Anyway, leave a comment below if you think that this is the future of online media analysis. I really want to know. I don't usually do calls to action in my videos like this, but I really feel like the discourse is fundamentally incomplete without a little feedback. And I wish I had a better forum to suggest than the YouTube comments section. I want an actual dialogue. I want to talk to a real live person about Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Somebody with a completely different opinion from me, just so long as they're willing to discuss it in good faith. Now, I know that's a tall order to fill. I mean, somebody who has the exact opposite opinion of me, who I know would be happy to take my call, but maybe someday I'll be able to find someone out there in the...
It is literally my mom's favorite movie. My mom's favorite movie.
Son of a bitch.
Hey!
How you doing?
Doing good.
Good.
Okay, so you can hear me fine?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been obsessing over sound quality. So I'm calling you because I understand Seven Brides for Seven Brothers is one of your favorite films, if not your favorite film, and it took me a while to come around to it. I guess you could say it kind of disturbed me the first time I saw it. And I think the core thing was that they kidnap these women, and then a bunch of stuff happens. It goes back and forth, and they learn some lessons. But in the end, their scheme worked. They kidnap these women, and then they marry them.
It is one of my all-time favorite movies, and for a long time I would watch movies, and it was completely entertainment value. If I enjoyed the movie, that was it. And this one for me was extremely entertaining because I do like musicals. I loved the story of this girl in the mountains, and I have this, never understood it because I grew up with girls, only sisters, but I really love men and boys and that ruggedness and the camaraderie and the goofy, silly kind of brotherhood. And I really didn't think very much of the whole kidnapping thing. I don't know why, except, and it wasn't until much later in my probably 40s that a person pointed out to me that whole misogynistic, rewarding misogyny. And I didn't believe him at first. I had to go back and watch like the Clint Eastwood cowboy movies with the girl and John Wayne with the girl. And they were almost bullies to the girl. And I know part of the reason that I absolutely adored the movie, The Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, is Millie.
Yeah.
Even though she does totally go head over heels for Adam at first look, she is still strong, but not mean and ugly. And she figured she's a beautiful picture of an assertive woman without confusing it with aggression.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Millie so early in the talk, because I've watched the movie 3 times in preparation for the video that I'm making about it, and what stood out to me in contrast to the first time I watched it, where I thought that Adam and his brothers were the main character, after three additional viewings, I'm like, no, this is totally Millie's story.
And that, when I was growing up, was very unusual. The girls were eye candy. But she was probably the first character that I ever really saw that I thought, I like her. I could be her friend. She made a difference in her life because she actually believed it and lived it. You know what I mean?
Oh, and at one point, I just want to get on tape I might not use this, but just that you'd referenced earlier that you grew up in a house full of girls. It was your mom and dad, and then you and 3 sisters. And then me, I grew up in a house almost exclusively boys, where it was you and dad and me and my 2 brothers. And I feel like you could do a whole nother video about people with nothing but sisters versus people with nothing but brothers. Reacting to 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. Which, and you know, I didn't even notice that difference until you mentioned it. So thank you for that. I sort of start my video with kind of a bad faith summary of the film, and then I end it with more of a good faith summary of the film, where it's like, well, if you want to get angry at the fact that these guys did something terrible to these women in order to get them to their home, the film agrees that what they did was terrible.
Yes. No. In the movie, they tell you that, they are not saying that this was a good thing.
Yeah.
They do try to cover a lot of time with, to show how it was possible for the girls, because they were obviously attracted to them at the very beginning when they saw them.
Yeah.
They were these mysterious mountain men, that came down.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one other thing I noticed on rewatch, is that they really did establish that these women's affection for their kidnappers didn't come out of nowhere.
I loved the way that in the movie, I thought they did a really good job of being able to show how much had passed, and that it would be a healthy transition. They went months and months of being lonely for their families and lonely for the social interaction and being cooped up in a house, and then all of a sudden spring comes and they get to see these guys for who they actually are. They're very kind, they're very thoughtful, they are even being a little bit penitent because they've been sleeping in the barn in the wintertime.
So like the whole point of my video is that I had this, in retrospect, a knee-jerk response to 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, where I made some sort of, I don't want to say moral judgment, but there was some sort of might as well, some sort of ethical judgment in my initial distaste for the film, which upon lots and lots of reflection, I think is more stylistic preferences, really.
Culturally, maybe even as a group, you can experience something together, and that kind of colors the way you perceive things and the way they take you,
Yeah. I mean, there's 33 years separating 7 Brides for 7 Brothers and Overboard, and then 33 years separating Overboard from me. There is a very different generational reception to either film. If anything else makes the film work for me, there is this pointed emphasis by the end of it that even if you think these women are nuts for agreeing to marry their captors, there is a pointed emphasis on the fact that it is these women's decision.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely hysterical that at the end, how they hear the baby and and that they have decided it because all of them say it was them.
Yeah, mine.
They are the mother,
Which
I don't leave any doubt or room for the dads to back out.
Yeah. And that's so silly to me. Not in like it's a terrible ending kind of way, but it's just so funny to me that like it's like when Millie takes the kid home, they're all gonna figure out that kid is not theirs. but by then the ink will be dry on all the marriage certificates, so it won't matter.
Yeah, but that to me, that's one of the ways that they use humor in the film.
Yeah, you're supposed to laugh at it.
Sometimes I like it in a movie when they do that, especially when, for me, people and you want them to have a happy ending and you want it to be a happy ending, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I like it when they tie it in a bow like that, a nice little bow, and they can tell us, give us enough in our imagination to continue it on in our own head. And it just, I don't know, I thought it did a really good job of showing, but it wasn't realistic, but it makes me happy to see when people change their mind and they're able to be persuaded to do the right thing. And when sometimes I'm living in a world that is just so out of its mind sometimes. If Brides for Seven Brothers comes on, I'm going to watch it. You can bet on it. It's 15 minutes. Just because it's like, 15 minutes of fresh air.
It's a very sweet movie.
Yes.
Maybe even sweeter than Overboard in hindsight. But it's, I don't know, it's clearly a movie that doesn't wish misery upon anyone in it. And yeah, that's very fun to watch. Even or perhaps especially right now. Before I stop recording, I just want to say thank you so much for being willing to talk about this. This has been really fun.
It really has been fun, and even if you don't use even a nanosecond of it, it has certainly been so much fun.
Good. I agree.
Damn. At what point do you understand the appeal of something so much that you actually start to enjoy it yourself?
Spending every night in a different state. Spending every night with a different date. I come into town and have a look around. Then I find a guy who wants to get down. I got boys all over the road. I got boys helping me unload. 40 boys in 40 nights. I got no time to see the sights. Sometimes